Hello, and welcome to this fourth episode of Creeping Up the Candle, which we've called Priests Only Work on a Sunday, a common misconception about what we get up to. So today we'll be thinking, what do we do on a Sunday and on other days? What about our daily work, and where do we find time to pray during it all? But the first thing we have to do, of course, is, John, the Lord be with you.
And also with you. Great to be back, and welcome back to all our listeners on this fourth episode.
Good to be back. So, getting straight in. Priests only work on a Sunday. This is something we hear a lot. My youngest, when I first said I was going to become a priest, said with great calmness and thought, but of course you'll work on a Thursday too, because that's when our church communion service was. So what do we think, John? Do we only work on a Sunday?
You wish, Mary. If I had £1 every time anyone says that priests only work on a Sunday, I could afford to retire today.
But, you know, we'll be fine.
It would.
There's only one less day than usual.
But the dynamics of our job, or shall I say our ministry, because what we do as clergy is more than a job, is really a way of life and a calling, vocation and a ministry. It's more complicated than people see or understand, and the extent of our day-to-day work. It is more than just on a Sunday.
Sadly so. But there's something, isn't there, about if we're doing a lot of our job, our ministry correctly, then people don't realise, because we're here to be a presence, and that might mean we're part of the team putting on the church fair, or we're chatting to people over coffee or whatever, and all of that is part of our ministry. But if we were suddenly to turn after church coffee into talking to the vicar, that would be wrong. We're there to be a quiet presence and find out what's going on with everybody else and support them.
And that is the importance, isn't it? The presence within the worshipping community and the wider community. This living witness. Mm-hmm. So, Mary, how do you divide your time?
Well, I think there's probably three main things that we do, and some days one takes precedence, some days it's another. So obviously we talked about Easter week, where it was all in church liturgy. Some weeks it feels like it's all visiting and community stuff. So I couldn't say I divide my time by going morning I do this, afternoon I do that, or whatever. But over the year, I think there are three main categories. The obvious one is being in church. We care a lot for our church community, our church family. And the one which I wasn't expecting to bring me so much joy, but I've absolutely loved, is being out in the community, not looking to convert people and bring them to church, but being out there, being a presence in the community. Do you think that's right?
There's a joy, isn't it, in understanding and noticing God at work in the community already, before the church goes there, and to join in God's work already out there. That's a great joy, and I think it's right, isn't it? There's three elements: celebrating the sacraments and a life of prayer, the caring for our souls and the worshipping community, and the presence, and joining God's work out and about in the wider community. And I think all these three dimensions, three areas, are underpinned by a life of study and prayer. Mm-hmm. And I think it is important to get the balance between the three, and that prayer and the celebration of the sacraments really are the most important, because it is the foundation of our ministry life. And from prayer and the sacraments, it flows our ministry life.
Everything else comes.
And of course, studying.
Mm-hmm. So studying actually is quite easy as a curate. It's easy to see when we do it, because you and I are required to spend it's often more than an hour, but
it is. Well, supervision. And then you have a study day as a curate. You don't get that as an incumbent.
But it's been great, because we can notice something that's interesting or curious, and you'll recommend a book that I could read on it, and then we'll come back and discuss. So there's a constant. It's not just going, we're going to put on this event, we're going to talk to these people, but there's a constant looking to see where God is, looking to see what other Christians have said about it, and obviously looking to the Bible to find out how we make sense of what we're doing.
It's part of this sermon, isn't it? We discern the vision of God God and the calling of God to see what we do, and that is for our sermons, that is for our church life, that is for our outreach and community involvement. But we know that this is not a 9-to-5 job. So what's the difference, or what have you noticed from coming from your teacher's job on this new role?
I think teaching is interesting because it's another one which expands. They both expand. You can continue preparing or whatever as much as you want for teaching. But at least in teaching, you're in the classroom 9 to 3:30, so you know you're at work. And even though your evenings are still spent marking and preparing, you're in front of a computer or whatever, you know that you're at work. Whereas here, sometimes you can be out doing stuff that I would ordinarily have done in my spare time, and suddenly it's work. But because I'm wearing a dog collar, it carries more meaning, to me anyway, hopefully to other people as well. But there's not really a typical day. So teaching, there's a typical day, and you know when things are different because it's sports day or you're going on a trip or whatever. Whereas here, I couldn't tell you from one day to the next what it's...
No.
We start with morning and evening prayer.
So we always have the same, isn't it? Morning and evening prayer, and then there will be different meetings, or there will be different events to join in. We have the communion, the Eucharist on a Wednesday morning, and then Saints' Days, but then of course that will vary.
Yeah.
Meetings for the community, supervision meetings, work with the school.
Yeah.
You do work with Age UK.
There's loads of stuff happens. And I still at the stage where I panic. So my diary is always really full 2 or 3 weeks ahead. And then I'm sort of looking on going, oh my goodness, but in 3 weeks' time it's going to be really quiet. Which...
By the time we're there,
it never happens. And you need to leave room because people will phone or someone will be ill and you need to go and see them, or people will phone and ask, can we talk about a baptism next week? Or especially funerals are obviously very time important. So I've struggled to go, actually, I'm going to leave a few gaps in my diary and trust that they will be filled. And they always are. And on the very odd occasion they're not. There's always people you can go visit because that's a constant.
So it is not an office job, because on top of all this, of course, we have all our emails and we have all the things that we have to do of admin. So it's layer upon layer, but it's not a 9-to-5 job because of the evening meetings and different things. So we need to be very careful on taking the day off, which that's what we are allowed, a day off a week. So it is important that spending time with family and friends, and to preserve that balance, and to do it right. Which, it's difficult.
It is difficult.
It is.
It's weird actually taking time off during the day because you know you've got an evening meeting. Because I know last week I went out for lunch with a friend because we'd worked on, we'd done mass and we had people all morning, and then I had stuff to do in the afternoon, and then we had an evening meeting. So I went out for lunch with a friend, and I was sort of saying to you, are we sure this is okay?
Yes, it is, of course it is okay. And also to acknowledge that our ministry, our day job, as it were, is very diverse because from day to day it can vary so much.
Yeah.
In fact, from 1 hour to the next, really,
absolutely.
isn't it? We can be talking to a funeral family in the morning. In the afternoon, you'll be talking to parents who want their child to be baptized.
Yeah.
And it is really a privilege. Because you go and you walk alongside people in the most important moments of their life, and the joy of a new baby, the joy of somebody coming to baptism, the joy of somebody getting married, and the sadness when somebody dies, and all in between.
It's a privilege, and there's a lot to process when you are going between all the different aspects. If you're out doing community stuff and preparing for the Christmas tree festival or whatever, and then coming to talk to a funeral family. And I suppose that's where the prayer and the study fit in, because we look for where we see God at work and we pray about it, and that helps us to process what could otherwise be a job where we are flitting from one thing to the next.
And also to take the time to debrief, especially after a funeral, when there's been, of course, a emotional intensity, that you can have the time to bring it to prayer and have a time of quietness, to unpack what's happening during the day. That is very important.
Yeah, because I think with funerals, even though it's not your grief, it brings back other emotions, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
And I suppose baptisms brings back your joy. That's wonderful.
Well, what about with your family life?
My family,
your
yes.
family life, 4 children and a husband. How do you balance all these things that we've been talking on a daily basis?
Yeah, this was one of the things. A lot of the time when I was exploring and through college, people have been asking how on earth are we going to balance. And it's a valid question. It is a busy job. I'm lucky because the kids are slightly older now, and they kind of understand too, I guess. But yes, so in some ways it's easier than when I was teaching, because now that they're teenagers, they kind of want to come home from school, have a bit of a chat, and then they go off and do their hobbies or hide in their rooms or whatever teenagers do. And our working agreement says, so we haven't done working agreements. Working agreements is when you start off as a curate, because there is no obvious you'll be in the office for these times, your working agreement is basically a paper version of which hours you're expected to work. And of course it says we'll be
part of the working agreement reflects this importance of balance.
Yes.
That you will get at least 1 session a day off, so you will work 2 sessions, 1 off.
Yeah.
So you have time for family, for friends, and for other things in life. I think, and the working agreement reflects the complicated dynamics of our ministry.
Yeah, absolutely. So if we're talking about sessions, if we imagine there's a morning, an afternoon and an evening session, we're meant to take one of those off. That usually works, not always around Christmas and Easter, but then you make up for it. And I think the kids do understand that if they don't see me for a week over Holy Week. It's just, I mean, yeah, who thought religious holidays and family holidays should be the same time?
But
they do. And of course, I mean, I think any working parent feels guilty because you're never doing enough. And actually now we have the guilt of never doing enough for the parish either.
Well, that is one temptation. I don't know about parents feeling guilty about not doing enough, but what I know is that in this ministry, because of not having the kind of lines of 9 to 5, you always feel the guilt, or you sometimes feel the guilt that you could do more, but this job is never finished, and I think that's important to acknowledge. And I'm sure a lot of clergy out there would share that.
Yeah, I missed the end of term, I have to say, because you've taken teaching, you take a class through the year, and then at the end of term, of course, their lives are going to go on and do loads of exciting things, but your part of their journey is done. Whereas here, we never get that kind of closure that we've, even Christmas or Easter, and then we come back and there's more stuff. And it's good stuff, and I love doing it, but there is always something more to do, isn't there?
And that's right. I think we take the longer view, because this is a life vocation. And as we said earlier, to be a priest is not an ordinary job. It is the calling, it is a ministry, it is a way of life. And again, going back, how important it is, the sacraments and prayer, and the daily office and the Eucharist. And I think that's where it's really rooted, and the daily prayer especially. And I think we might want to just briefly mention that it is really the foundation of our parish life as well. So important that in the Church of England, morning and evening prayer, prayed every day. And when we are ordained, we have to promise that we will be regular at morning and evening prayer. And it's keeping this life of prayer. And also finding moments through the day, doing our own devotions and contemplation and our own time of prayer. That is really, as I see it, is the blood that sustains. It is, if you wish to use the word energy, it is the movement, and it is that blood that pumps the ministry.
Yeah, I think we should probably, so morning and evening prayer are prescribed. Church of England has a set of readings and set of prayers which we do, and it changes slightly through the seasons, but largely it would look like you gather, you have an Old and a New Testament reading, and you say some psalms, and so we follow through. And it's been lovely actually, because as an ordinand we prayed the same way. So a lot of the words, the night has passed and the day lies open before us, I remember praying that when I was a trainee, and the emotions that had, and when we were in Poland and in the Holy Land, and the same words have followed us all the way through, I think.
For me, I think daily prayer, it has the structure that has been for centuries and centuries, and it's based on the monastic daily office. So you have matins, lauds, prayer during the day, and vespers, which is evening prayer, compline, night prayer, and it is the church always praying and ceasing prayer and ending prayer from one end of the world to the other, always following this same pattern of the psalms, the canticles, the gospel canticles of the Benedictus and the Magnificat, and the prayers that sustains the life of the church. So joining in daily prayer, it is one of the main jobs that we ought to do as clergy.
Yeah, and I think it's shifted from being something that we ought to do, because there's a lot of words in it. I mean, I like words, as we know, but there's an awful lot of words, and it took me a while to come to love it, especially the days when we have the longer Bible readings. But actually, I do love the fact we now have the longer Bible readings, because you hear over the course of a week or 2 weeks, like a whole book of the Bible, and you see how it all fits in. So, yeah, I think I'm coming to love it slowly.
Well, by the time you finish your curacy, you will love it. You will love it.
I'll be like, I remember when I used to pray this in St. Paul's. And actually in St. Paul's with you and with our readers and other people who come. So it's not just a closed thing.
No, everyone is invited to join in the daily prayer. And as I said before, they will have all the moments of prayer which we do if we are not celebrating the Eucharist in church. We will have our time of contemplation prayer. We go on a retreat. So that's to acknowledge that prayer is an important part of our life. We will have a time of spiritual reading and Bible reading.
Yeah. And of course, your retreats you do on your own. I go with a group of other people.
I do go on my own.
Yeah. So, I think, again, as an extrovert, the idea of having to go on retreat when we first started was quite scary. Because I don't do shutting myself away and thinking.
How would you cope with a silent retreat?
I'd have to write notes to people, I think pass them under the door.
My joy to have a silent retreat.
Away from the curate for a whole week.
Well, it might be an interesting point for our listeners to check the spiritual exercises by St. Ignatius of Loyola, which is a whole month
of
weeks in silence, following the exercises. So you can talk to God, and you can talk to your director. You can talk to your spiritual director during that month, but you are meant to be quiet and in silence, contemplating the wonders of God and in prayer and discernment.
See, but you can talk about the wonders of God.
Absolutely, to God.
Yeah. I think it depends, doesn't it? Because I tend to think, as we've learned from recording this, I tend to think as I talk. And I don't know quite how I think on a silent retreat.
Well, something to try.
An extrovert's retreat.
A challenge.
This year, I got round it isn't the right word. I went with a group of other curates on retreat, and we shared a book and we talked. But I guess the idea is that we pray, don't we? Even though you and I do it very differently.
We have different styles, and of course, in our personal prayer, we do it each one with their own style.
You see that with morning prayer. Some people come and then leave straight away. Other people stay for a chat. And I guess that kind of links back, doesn't it? We are doing morning prayer with other people because our ministry is for other people as well. And we're walking alongside them for a bit of their journey. Because neither you or I will stay here forever.
No.
And so we meet people with wonderful prayer lives and lives of faith, which we're privileged to walk alongside for a bit, whether it be the really beginning or in the middle, and they've got stuff to share with us. So, yeah, it's...
So next time you see a clergy, don't assume that we only work on a Sunday.
No, please, there you go. That is the main message. Although we do work on a Sunday, and that takes us to next time's topic. It is thinking about what we do just on Sunday Eucharist. We talked a lot about the special liturgies, but we've never actually thought deeply, or we've thought deeply, we haven't talked deeply about the Eucharist on a Sunday. So that is where we intend to go next time.
So there will be reflections about the Eucharist and how deaconing for the first time and all the practicalities for not anymore the new curate,
no,
for the deacon.
The old and wise curate, as I now am. Well, I think all that remains to say is thank you for listening.
Thank you so much for listening to our podcast. And please send your feedback, comments on our email. What's the email?
creepingupthecandle@gmail.com. Yes, please give us inspiration for more podcasts. So all that remains to say is, John, the Lord be with you.
And also with you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Creeping Up the Candle. We hope you enjoyed it. If so, please follow us and we'll be back with another episode very soon. And last but by no means least, thank you so much to Kevin and Estelle Holland for providing the music.